What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the JT Sports Podcast. I'm your host, JT. Happy Feel Good Friday to y'all. Happy Memorial Day weekend as well. Let me know down in the comment section what y'all going to be getting into for Memorial Day weekend. Are you going out? Are you putting something on the grill? Are you going to bring me a plate? Just kidding. But I want to dive in to some drama that's been going on in college football. We are in jeopardy of losing another great rivalry, that being USC versus Notre Dame. We'll start off with thoughts on that. I want to respond to the backlash that I've been receiving from my take on Florida closing the gap with Georgia. Then we'll dive into Deion Sanders. What are we going to see from him year 3 at Colorado? Miami's defense could finally be championship caliber. Florida State's new quarterback. And who's the dark horse team to look out for in the SEC? Smash that like button. Subscribe to the channel. Turn on post notifications. If you're new, you can find us wherever you get your podcasts from. Apple, Spotify. Links are down in the description. If you're currently listening on podcasting platforms, give us a 5-star review if you haven't already. If you need a reason to go through your girlfriend's phone, tell her, hey, babe, I want to support JT Sports. I want to rate his podcast 5 stars. Gives you a good reason to do a little bit of snooping if you need to. But without further ado, let's dive into it. Wants to extend it for another decade. Meanwhile, USC is on the fence of if it's even worth keeping this rivalry around. They only extended it until 2026. And the reason why USC is contemplating staying in this rivalry game is because of conference realignment and the college football playoffs. With them moving from the Pac-12 to the Big Ten, they really see no need to continue to play Notre Dame every year when their schedule is already good enough to where you're playing about 4 or 5 quality teams, which makes your schedule difficult enough to where if you handle business, you'll be in the college football playoffs. And playing Notre Dame does nothing but jeopardize your chances of making it to the CFP if you do suffer a loss on top of an already loaded schedule, which I feel is a pretty good point. USC also is tired of Notre Dame having their cake and eating it too. Why should they have to go through the gauntlet of the Big Ten while Notre Dame gets to pick and choose who they get to play? And sometimes Notre Dame can get into the playoffs playing a more weaker schedule than USC. All of those are valid points, but it still doesn't make USC look good in this situation. They look soft not wanting to continue to play Notre Dame long term. You shouldn't be worried about trying to get to the playoffs if you haven't gotten there yet. If Notre Dame was in the way of USC getting into the postseason in the past and you had like a Florida State situation, that's understandable why you wouldn't want to play Notre Dame. But Notre Dame isn't holding USC back from getting to the CFP. USC is holding them own selves back from getting to the playoffs. When you lost to Maryland, you're having L's to Michigan and Washington, which you should have won those games. This Notre Dame rivalry had nothing to do with it. And I don't believe Lincoln Riley is the sole reason why USC wants out of this thing. Apparently, they're waiting to see how the expanded playoffs is going to be formatted, rather that be 14, 16, or 40 teams. Doesn't really matter. That's going to determine if they see it being worth keeping this rivalry game around. But I don't feel like playing Notre Dame has any factor on your playoff chances. If you're good enough, you should be able to beat Notre Dame. Georgia and Georgia Tech are not in the same conference. You don't see any one of those teams trying to get out of their rivalry. Iowa and Iowa State playing 2 different conferences. You don't see any one of those guys tripping on the rivalry game, impacting their playoff chances. If you handle business, you don't have to worry about that. And Notre Dame has already tried to accommodate USC. Normally, this game was played later in the season. Now, due to USC playing in the Big Ten, they've moved this game to earlier during the year. USC, by not playing Notre Dame, isn't necessarily a power play to force them to join the conference, but I do feel this situation is going to foreshadow what's to come for Notre Dame in terms of their reluctantness to join the conference. Teams eventually, with how deep these conferences are, eventually are going to feel like, the SEC schedule or the Big Ten schedule is already tough enough. There's no benefit in us playing Notre Dame because, for one, if we beat you, it doesn't really beef up our resume that much when our schedules are already loaded. If we win our conference games, we're going to be in the playoffs. But if we lose to Notre Dame and we do take another loss in conference, it only hurts our chances of getting in. And you see, a few years back, when Brian Kelly was the head coach of Notre Dame, they were viewed to be a quality team that was good enough to make you look good to get in the playoffs if you needed that added beef to your schedule, because back then the SEC and the Big Ten weren't as deep as what they are now. So if you beat Notre Dame, you knew that it was going to make you look good in the eyes of the committee. And plus, it would be a game that you had a high chance of winning against a quality team. But with how this program has started to trend up recently under Marcus Freeman, beating Penn State, Indiana, Georgia, and the CFP this past year, programs are eventually going to be reluctant to play Notre Dame because now they're not an easy quality win that they used to be. And therefore, it's somewhat going to force Notre Dame to have to make that ultimatum. Do you continue to be an independent and keep playing Clemson and some of the other teams in the Big 12 or the ACC, or are you going to join the conference? The ACC may not be around by the time Notre Dame chooses to join the conference, so you will have no choice but to join the Big Ten. But teams are not going to see any reason to play Notre Dame if they already have a loaded schedule. There's no need to increase the difficulty unless you care about pride, respect, and bragging rights, which is what college football is all about. It's not all about making it to the playoffs. Rivalries are what has made college football such the great sport that it is. It's the fabric of this sport at heart. Rivalries, tradition, the hate, the pageantry. And with USC winning out of this Notre Dame rivalry, it makes them look soft. I know you USC fans are going to be mad at me for saying that, but you look soft in this situation. A year ago, when it was alleged that USC wanted out of that LSU opener from last year that they won, they came out and said that we're willing to play anybody. And if you're willing to play anybody, you should continue to play Notre Dame. You should not see Notre Dame as a roadblock to getting you to the playoffs. You're a hypocrite when you're going to say Notre Dame's path to the playoffs is easier than ours, so we're going to make it even more easier for us by taking them off the schedule. Clemson doesn't view it that way. Texas A&M didn't view it that way. There are other teams that are going to be more than willing to play Notre Dame. Hell, I'll guarantee you Georgia will be willing to play Notre Dame, and they don't have no reason to but to show that they are the best team in college football. If you believe that you are the best, you should want to play the best every single week, not try to nitpick, oh, well, our schedule's so tough, we don't really need to play them. You can't get mad at Notre Dame for scheduling weak opponents when look at some of the random schools you're playing up against. I just feel USC not wanting to extend this Notre Dame rivalry long term makes them look really soft because you just want a more easier path to the playoffs when Notre Dame isn't holding you back. You're holding your own self back. It would be one thing if you played Notre Dame and, them beating them, despite them being highly ranked, still didn't get you into the playoffs. If you had the same record as another team that got in over you with a weaker schedule. But that just want to opt out of nearly a century-long rivalry just makes you look really soft and weak. If you haven't already, smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, turn on post notifications so you don't miss when we drop new content. A few days ago, when we last recorded the college football podcast, I did a segment about how I felt Florida was closing the gap on Georgia. And when I clipped it and posted it on TikTok, it blew up, and I got a lot of backlash for that take. You have folks saying, oh, with Georgia having Kirby Smart, we're never going to lose to Florida, as if Kirby Smart makes Georgia invincible and they're incapable of ever losing to Florida. Florida this year is as good as they've ever been with Billy Napier as the head coach. Nobody was gassing up Florida around this time last year. So the notion that Florida's being overhyped like always is bullshit and false. Last year around this time, we were all hedging bets on the over-under when Billy Napier was going to get fired. We felt Florida wasn't that good to survive the gauntlet of a schedule that they had, and they overachieved relative to what the expectations were. You had DJ Lagway, who was a freshman All-American. When he took over at quarterback, the season turned around for Florida, and some of the younger players on this squad stepped up in a major way. And it's not insane to think that Florida is closer to beating Georgia this year than what they've been these last couple of years, when you have a young, promising quarterback in DJ Lagway who has shown us more promise in his small sample size than what we've seen out of Gunnar Stockton. You have a more proven rushing attack. Florida's run game was in the middle of the pack last year. Georgia's rushing attack was their biggest Achilles heel on offense last year out of their wide receivers having butterfingers. The offensive line that Florida has this year has 2 projected top 50 picks. And their defensive line, their pass rush, returns more proven production than what Georgia's does. Georgia's replacing 2 pass rushers that got drafted in the NFL and another one that got picked up as a UDFA. What Florida brings into this season is Tyreek Sapp and Caleb Banks at defensive tackle, who are projected to be first-round picks in the 2026 draft. With Florida having more proven production on the O-line, the defensive line, having the advantage at quarterback, and a more proven ground game, there is a fair reason to believe that for once in Billy Napier's tenure at Florida, this team actually has a shot at taking down Kirby and the Dogs. Let's not forget, when these two teams faced off last year, Georgia was supposed to run this team out of the stadium. And it was a tightly contested game into the final 6 minutes. This game last year was way closer than what the final score indicated. And with DJ Lagway more than likely taking a big step of improvement, and this team being more talented this year with what they have coming back, what they've got from the transfer portal, the guys that have had another year of development, it is not insanity to think that Florida is closing the gap on Georgia. The recruiting is also trending up as well. Having Kirby Smart doesn't make you unbeatable. You lost to Ole Miss last year, the same team that Georgia beat with DJ Lagway. I understand the backlash from a fandom standpoint, but if you're a Georgia fan and you take your fan cap off and you look at what Florida has coming in this year in terms of proven production, it's not crazy to believe that this is Florida's best shot to beat you. You have concerns when it comes to your pass rush. There's a reason why you have to go in the transfer portal recently and get that transfer from Army. With what Florida has in terms of proven production, they have that advantage over you on the defensive line and when it comes to getting after the quarterback. Kirby Smart actually was quoted not too long ago saying that the edge rushers that we have this year are not up to the standard that we've had in years past. And Florida is labeled as a team that is a borderline playoff squad this year. They could go 9-3 and be in the CFP. And Georgia, I'm not going to say they're trending down because last year was a down year for them. Kirby Smart did an incredible job. That was his best ever coaching job. It was reminiscent to the job Nick Saban did coaching Alabama his final season before he retired. Despite all of the injuries they had and the limitations that they had, they still were able to win the conference and make it to the playoffs. But it's not as if Georgia is as dominant now as what they've been early on during Kirby Smart's tenure. When you went up against Dan Mullen, he did a poor job of recruiting and developing talent. Billy Napier has recruited really well. He's developed really well. And it's the main reason why he was given a fourth season. The majority of Florida's young players that they have all this NIL money tied into perform well. Well, we had a true freshman at running back last year. That's why our ground game wasn't good. So did Florida. Jaden Ball was one of the best true freshman running backs in America. Florida had an All-American center and Jake Slaughter, first team at that. There are certain areas that Florida is better than right now than what Georgia is. Yes, we know that Georgia doesn't rebuild, they reload. But with the issues they had last year, there's no guarantee that those issues are going to be corrected. Georgia fans were calling for Mike Bobo to get fired for a good reason. You were mad at your receivers for having all of these drops. You don't know what you have in Gunnar Stockton. Florida knows what they have in DJ Lagway. You can look at the stats all you want to and try to downplay how good he was and the impact that he had on his team. But let me remind you that DJ Lagway played nowhere near 100%. When he got carted off against Texas, I thought that was the end of his season. I was shocked to see him return and finish out the rest of the year. I thought that was a season-ending injury. Anytime you see a player getting carted off, you never expect him to come back. So I give DJ Lagway a little bit of grace when it comes to the stats. Gunnar Stockton, he helped you win the SEC championship, but you didn't ask him to do much. He wasn't really that impressive against Notre Dame. Just because you have Kirby Smart and he, without a question, is the best coach in college football doesn't mean you're incapable of taking the L to Florida. It doesn't mean that Florida is not closing in on you in terms of where you're at from a talent standpoint and where they're at from a talent standpoint. Folks love to throw out returning production, but when it favors their rival, though, they just want to scratch it off and act like it doesn't matter. This is the most experienced and the most talented team that Billy Napier has had at Florida. You are not a lunatic. You don't know ball just because you feel like this is Florida's best shot to take down the Dogs. I'm not saying that Florida is going to beat Georgia. What I am saying is that this is their best shot to do so. Georgia is not what they used to be anymore. It's not like they're blowing out everybody. They're running roughshod through the SEC. I never thought that Lane Kiffin would beat Kirby Smart. I never thought that Florida would be as good under Billy Napier in year 4 as what they are right now. If you would have told me that Billy Napier was going to save his job last year, I wouldn't have believed you. But he did. It shows that he's a pretty good coach. And his program is trending upwards under him. He resurrected Cormani McClain's career. This was somebody that was casted off, written off. Nobody thought that he would be able to live up to the 5-star billing he had coming out of high school. And now he's expected to have a breakout season for the Gators. If you would have told me that it would have took Georgia 9 overtime periods to take down Georgia Tech, I wouldn't have saw that coming before the season. You don't know what Florida is capable of this season. Just like you didn't know what Georgia Tech was capable of. The playing field still isn't level. Georgia still has a talent advantage over Florida, but it's not as wide this year as what it's been in years past. And that's why I say Florida is closing the gap on the Bulldogs and why this is their best shot to beat Kirby Smart and company this year. They are getting all of this hype for a reason. Nobody had them in the top 25 last year. Nobody expected them to be a playoff team. I just think that fans who buy into their fandom so much that they think their rivals never have a shot at beating them. Like, it's one thing to be a fan. It's another thing to just think that you're better than everybody else and you can't be beat. We saw Georgia be beat last year. We nearly saw them lose to Georgia Tech. If you could come close to losing to Georgia Tech, you damn sure could lose to Florida this year. How good Colorado was last year was one of the biggest surprises in college football. Remind you, around this time last year, most people didn't even think that they would be better than a 6-win team at best. And they went 9-4, which is only the second winning season that Colorado football has had in 2 decades. They had 7 games that they won by 2 possessions or more. Travis Hunter won the Heisman. Shedeur had a really great season. And with the direction that this Colorado program is trending entering year 3 under Deion Sanders, we could expect for Colorado to take an even bigger step this year than what we saw them take in 2024. This was a 7-on-7 team in Deion Sanders' first 2 years. They didn't have a good offensive line. They couldn't run the football. They could only just throw it all over the yard. Well, this year, though, you're going to be a more well-rounded team. Your ground game is going to improve with the addition of Caden Salter out of the transfer portal. He's a way better athlete than what Shedeur was. And if you can't get good production out of your running backs, he's going to be able to pick up that slack. You can use design quarterback runs, read options, which eventually should help open up that ground game. Your offensive line, eventually you have to think at some point, Deion is going to get it right. He keeps bringing in a bunch of offensive linemen via the portal. He has like a dozen of them that he brought in this year. You should at least have an average O-line this year. And we know that Colorado is always good when it comes to skill position. They have good corners. They got great receivers. Look out for Amarion Miller. He could easily emerge as one of the elite receivers in college football. I don't forget the performance he had 2 years ago against USC when Colorado came back and nearly won that game. He got injured really early during the 2024 season. I'm really excited to see how good he's going to be this year. They got a true freshman out of the state of Texas that had like 30 touchdowns, and he was only like 5'9", 5'10", 155 pounds. But the dude is like the second coming to take down with Tyreek Hill mixed into him. You just can't catch him. Colorado is loaded this year. And Deion Sanders has also assembled a really good coaching staff. Their hiring of defensive coordinator Robert Livingston doesn't get talked about enough. Colorado's defense went from one of the worst in college football, they couldn't stop a fly in year 1, to a top 50 unit with Robert Livingston taking over in just 1 season. Imagine how good this defense is going to be in year 2 under him. And if you want another example of how good of a coach Robert Livingston was, he was the Cincinnati Bengals secondary coach before he became Colorado's DC. Look at how bad Cincinnati's defense dropped off last season without him. Warren Sapp, when they hired him as their defensive line coach, it was viewed to be Deion just hiring his buddies. He wasn't really serious. Warren Sapp had those big boys up front moving, and they were causing a lot of havoc. They were really good getting after the quarterback. And then you add Marshall Faulk, another Hall of Famer, to this staff to coach up your running backs. This is quietly one of the better coaching staffs in college football. They're not top 10, they're not top 15, but there definitely is a lot of good coaches in that coaching room that Deion Sanders has. And for the expectations that I have for Colorado this year, I expect them to compete for the Big 12 title. Their offensive line should be improved. Their D-line still returns a lot of production from last year. And if you can get some really good interior defensive tackle play, this could be a really good season, year 3 from Coach Prime and the Buffs. Their ceiling is 10-2. If they can beat Georgia Tech week 1, that's a good way to start off the year. You got to play BYU, Iowa State, and Arizona State, who you all tied for first place in the Big 12 last year with. You're capable of beating any team on your schedule this year as long as you can find a way to improve that offensive line, which Deion Sanders should have had that figured out. It's his 3rd season now. Eventually, you have to think that he's going to get that right. And if he has gotten that right, that's going to open up so much for this offense that we didn't see in his first 2 seasons. They barely ran the football. They had a few running backs that didn't even register over 100 carries. They were running the ball like 10, 12 times a game at most. This year, this is a more well-rounded team than what Deion Sanders has had in his first 2 years in Boulder. Caden Salters, he may not be Shador when it comes to throwing the football, but he's a better overall athlete. He's going to be able to extend plays. He's going to be able to generate big plays off play calls that may not look that good. Pat Shermer's my only question mark with this team, really. But if you have a guy like Caden Salters that has the kind of ability to run around and extend plays like he has, he can turn a bad play into a great play. And I think he quietly is going to be one of the best quarterbacks in college football this year. He was really good during his time at Liberty. And when Colorado first got him, I was a little bit shocked. I thought that he would have went to a way bigger school, at a way bigger program. But the way that Deion Sanders is building this team isn't ideal. Normally, you think the only way to build up a team is recruiting hard and bringing in a few transfers here and there. No, what Deion Sanders is doing is not just trying to find guys that are ready to play immediately out of the transfer portal, but he also is finding guys that, even if they aren't ready to play for him right away, they can sit for a year, develop, get bigger, faster, stronger, and come their second season at Colorado, they're good enough to start. So he's building this team through the portal, somewhat like how you would via recruiting. And like he said, why would I pay for somebody out of high school who's unproven when I can go get proven guys out of the portal? The transfer portal additions that Colorado has gotten this year, the difference between what they've gotten in years past was you were banking on a lot of guys with upside. This year, you're bringing in guys that have a good amount of experience, guys that have already proven themselves. And then you bring in a few guys that have really high upside, like the former Alabama defensive tackle that they got, who was a 4-star, 5-star coming out of high school. Alabama fans were hurt to lose him. He should be a really big-time addition to this Colorado defense. I really believe that Colorado has a great shot at winning the Big 12 this year. And I picked them to win the Big 12 last year. I had them going 10-2, and they were pretty close to doing that until they ended up having that hiccup late against Kansas. But this year, though, despite their schedule being a little bit more tougher, they're good enough to beat anybody that they play. They're not playing Oregon. They're not playing Alabama. Everybody that they have to match up against this year is beatable. And Deion Sanders has more than shown that he's a quality head coach. This isn't an experiment anymore. We know that Deion Sanders isn't going to lose you anything more than 5 games max. The ceiling for Colorado is 10-2. The floor, 7-5, 8-4 for me. I expect a big year out of the Buffs entering their 3rd season under Coach Prime. Miami would have made it to the playoffs last year if they had a playoff caliber defense. They had poor run defense. Their pass defense was allowing guys like Kyle McCord and Tyler Shuck to throw the football all over the field against them. And with them firing Lance Guidry and replacing him with a new defensive coordinator, along with bringing a lot of new faces in from the transfer portal, there's a good chance that Miami finally has a championship caliber defense that can help them finally win the ACC championship for their first time ever. Yeah, I know they've been in this conference for a very long time and they've yet to win it. This defense could change that, though. Mario Cristobal, say what you want to about him not being that good of a game day coach. The guy's a good recruiter, and he doesn't hesitate to make changes when necessary. And that all started when he pretty much cleaned house with his prior defensive staff. And then he revamped it, bringing in defensive coordinator Corey Heatherman from Minnesota. Last year, Corey Heatherman's defense carried Minnesota in a bunch of games that they won. They were in the top 10 in several statistical categories. They were 9th in pass yards per game allowed, 5th in yards per game allowed, and they only gave up 16.9 yards per game, which was 9th best in college football. Miami is also going to be bringing in a bunch of really good position coaches. You got a new D-line coach, 2 new coaches in the secondary, which includes safety coach Will Harris, who Miami got from Florida. He's considered to be one, if not the best safety coach in college football. So Miami is going to be a vastly better coach defense this year than what they were in 2024. And Mario Cristobal spent a lot of money improving this secondary in the transfer portal. You get Wisconsin corner Xavier Lucas, who started every game for the Badgers as a true freshman last season. He was the #1 rated cornerback from this past portal cycle. And I expect him to not just become an elite cornerback for Miami, but an eventual first-round pick in a few years. He's 6'2", 200 pounds, so that's really good size for an outside corner. Charles Brantley, they pick him up from Michigan State. He's going to be bringing a bunch of experience to this defense. He has 24 starts. In the 9 games that he played last year for the Spartans, he caught 3 interceptions. He had 7 pass breakups. And he had the 2nd lowest passer rating allowed in college football. You also got another corner from Washington State and Ethan O'Connor, who was the 10th rated cornerback from the portal. He had 32 tackles. He led Washington State in interceptions with 4, along with 8 pass breakups. And pairing all 3 of these guys up with O.J. Frederick, who was a freshman All-American for Miami last season. He was the only bright spot the Canes had at cornerback last season. This should be one of the best cornerback rooms in all of college football. Not just do you have a lot of talent at this position, but you got a lot of depth. So if you have some injury issues like you did last year, it's next man up. You should still be able to get really high level production. Miami also got some really good players on the back end at safety. Zachariah Poyser from Jacksonville State, he's coming off a breakout campaign, 75 tackles, 3 interceptions, and 8 tackles for loss. Not just is he good in coverage, but he also can come down and lay the hammer down in the run game. And he was the 2nd best safety in the transfer portal. Jacoby Thomas, they recently got him a few weeks ago out of Tennessee, and 3 seasons at Middle Tennessee State and with the Vols. He has had over 130 career tackles, 4 picks, a few forced fumbles to go along with a few pass breakups. And he was a top 10 player during the spring portal window. So this is not just a revamped secondary, but this is one of the most stacked secondaries in all of college football. I feel this is money well spent. Like I said, great depth, a lot of high-level talent, and a bunch of these guys should be playing in the NFL. And a few of these guys like Ethan O'Connor and Xavier Lucas, what I love about these pickups is they're not just one-year rentals like Charles Brantley. These are guys who are going to be around for at least another season or 2. And on the defensive line, Miami didn't really have to hit the portal that hard to improve this area of their defense due to how well Mario Cristobal has recruited. You got 3 former top 50 recruits on this D-line entering this year. And you are really good getting after the quarterback. And with you losing Tyler Barron and Simeon Barrow to the NFL draft, you're going to need these guys to step up. You got a few guys that return as well. Ruben Bain is a guy to look out for. Athletic freak, really good size. He's been projected to be a top 50 pick in next year's draft. And expect a breakout campaign from defensive tackle Justin Scott. He was rotated in a good amount last season, and he was like the 11th rated player out of his recruiting class from the South Florida area. And he's a big, twitchy athlete. He should be not just good against the run when he's causing a bunch of havoc plays, but he should be able to get really good pressure on the quarterback. I expect them to have around like 4 or 5 sacks, which may not be that impressive from a box score standpoint, but when you can get a defensive tackle that can give you 4 or 5 sacks, that's really good production. The only question that I have about this Miami defense is the play that they're going to be getting out of linebacker, only due to the lack of proven production that they have. But overall, Miami has a championship caliber defense this year. This is a defense that is not just good enough to win the ACC, but they also are good enough to make Miami a national title contender. Now you got a really good offense. You got a good defense. I expect to see Miami competing for the ACC title this year. At least that's what the ceiling and the expectation should be. This is a stacked defense. New coaching staff. Corey Heatherman should be a really good addition. And even if this defense isn't as good as what it was at Minnesota under Corey Heatherman, you can't do anything worse than Lance Guidry. That guy was just absolutely terrible. So I'm expecting big things out of this Miami Hurricanes defense in 2025. Thomas Castellanos is going to be Florida State's new quarterback this year. They get him out of the portal from Boston College, and he was really good last season in the games that he started. He had 18 touchdowns, only 5 interceptions, which was a tremendous improvement from the amount of turnovers that he threw the season prior. And I don't really know the whole story for why he got benched. He got injured, and then Bill O'Brien decided to go in a different direction. And Florida State's offense, this is going to be a big year for him. Mike Norvell, when he had a lot of success, it was with Jordan Travis. And Thomas Castellanos has a similar skill set to Jordan Travis. He's not the same player, at least physically. He's a lot smaller. He's only like 5'9", 200 pounds. But he has a really good arm. He's small, very shifty. To me, Thomas Castellanos is a Dollar General version of Kyler Murray. He's not the elite athlete that he was. Neither does he have the arm that Kyler Murray possessed. But he's not too far off. And in this Gus Malzahn system, we know how much he loves to run his quarterbacks, design QB runs, a lot of option plays. This is the perfect offense that is tailored around a guy that has the skill set that Castellanos has. And the chances of him being as bad or not a major improvement from DJU is really, really low. And he's going to be able to extend plays, which is going to be needed when you have an offensive line that has a lot of question marks. Last year, the blocking was pretty much non-existent, and he's going to help open up that run game. Now, anytime you plug any running back or any dual threat quarterback into this Gus Malzahn system, they get like a times 50 multiplier to their talent level, because everywhere Gus Malzahn has been, when he has had a quarterback with this kind of talent, they normally perform well. And he reminds me of when Gus Malzahn had Nick Marshall, when he went to the national championship early during his Auburn career, but just a way better thrower of the football. And Mike Norvell, he knows quarterbacks. With DJU, it wasn't all on him for why he wasn't that good. The receivers weren't that good as well. The offensive line didn't do him no favors. With having Thomas Castellanos, FSU possibly could have a top 3 quarterback in the ACC this year. Is this going to be an NFL guy? Probably not, due to his size limitations, but he should turn into a really good college quarterback. And I'm really excited for what Castellanos can do in this offense. Like I said, with how bad that old line was last year, you're going to need somebody who can improvise. And not just as having a mobile quarterback like him help out the offensive line, but it helps out the guy calling the plays. Having Thomas Castellanos, just with his ability to make things happen when plays break down, he can turn what should be a negative play into a positive play. And that was the trait that stood out the most when you watched him play at Boston College, especially when he was going off against Florida State last year. I think that was a large reason why Mark Norvell went after him. And I don't see how he doesn't end up being an improvement from what DJU was and Brock Glenn was. And just with him giving FSU competent quarterback play, you should at least win 7 games. There's no way you're going to be as bad as what you were last year. Having bad quarterback play is a key contributor to any team having a bad season. Look at what happened with Alabama last year with Jalen Milroe. He couldn't even complete the forward pass at times. It was a struggle for him. With Thomas Castellanos, you're getting somebody that just is such a great fit. He's just a plug and play. He's a no-brainer to have a breakout campaign for the Seminoles this year. And he's one of the few reasons why I think that FSU ends up bouncing back. He ran for 1,000 yards in 2023. So the upside is there. The athleticism is there. If he can become a lot accurate, throwing the ball from within the pocket, I think that probably was the main catalyst for Bill O'Brien making the transition from him to the other guy that they were starting, because in his system, you need to be able to throw from within the pocket. But we got a guy that's 5'9". He's not going to be able to see that well over like 6'5" and 6'6" offensive linemen. So you probably going to see Mark Norvell cooking up a bunch of bootlegs, rolling him outside the pocket, just allowing his mobility to help take over games. That's what FSU was missing last year. You did have Kromenhawk, who was pretty mobile, but not like how Thomas Castellanos is. When he runs the ball, he's like a running back. That's why I compare him to Kyler Murray. Kyler Murray and him have similar skill sets. It's just Kyler Murray was just way more talented than what Castellanos is. But if you can get 60, 70% of Kyler Murray out of Castellanos, that's a huge improvement from what you were getting out of this position last year. And let's say Thomas Castellanos really takes off and he ends up becoming as good as what Kyler or Jordan Travis were. With that level of quarterback play, that could propel Florida State right back in the mix for winning the ACC championship. With how this conference is, most of these teams coming in this year don't really have a lot of proven good quarterback play. Thomas Castellanos is somebody that you can feel comfortable with because he has a lot of experience under his belt. You have somebody that is a perfect fit in the system that Gus Malzahn runs. So I'm expecting Thomas Castellanos to have a pretty good season for Florida State. At worst, he should still be serviceable for you. But at his best, if he can take those strides as a passer and get better throwing the football downfield, he's going to be really good. And it can't be that hard throwing deep bombs when you got Deuce Robinson, who's like 6'6" and catches fucking everything. Texas A&M had a really successful first season under head coach Mike Elko. They finished 8-5, but at one point they were 7-1. They had some really good wins against Missouri and LSU after they dropped that opener to Notre Dame. But then after that 7-1 start, that's when things just completely went off the rails for them. Marcel Reed got banged up in a few matchups, and they lost 4 straight games against Power 4 teams to end the season, including their bowl loss against USC. And they also had a chance to make it to the SEC title game. All they had to do was beat Texas, but they came up short in that game. Ultimately, Mike Elko's first year in College Station, I feel, makes Texas A&M a dark horse team in the SEC this upcoming season because they returned the 4th most starters in college football this year. You got Marcel Reed, who was really good when he took over for Connor Wigman. Not just was he really dynamic running the football, but he was pretty good throwing the ball at times. And with him going into year 2 in this system, I expect him to take even more strides throwing the ball. Hopefully, their wide receiving position ends up being a lot better than what it was previously because wide receivers at times for A&M weren't really that good at getting open, creating separation. Against Notre Dame, they got completely shafted and boxed. So I expect Marcel Reed to be one of the better quarterbacks in the SEC this year. And I don't think he's getting talked about enough for the Heisman Trophy. Yeah, he may not be as appealing as a guy like Arch Manning or DJ Lagway, but he definitely is good enough as what those guys are from a talent standpoint to win it. He kind of has like Jaden Daniels vibes to him. And you also get a healthy Le'Veon Moss. That was a huge reason also why you ended up having such a sour end to last season, because he got injured and he was the bell cow of your offense. And not just do you have Le'Veon Moss, but you got a lot of depth behind him at running back as well. And it also helps that you return all 5 of your starters on the offensive line from last year. You got an experienced group of linebackers and a really experienced secondary, which we should see this pass defense improve tremendously year 2 under Mike Elko. They were 96 in the country in pass yards per game allowed. There were times when they did give up a good amount of chunk plays, but what's going to determine if Texas A&M can win the SEC this year is going to come down to their wide receiver play. They lost their top 5 receiving options from the previous season. You added a really good wide receiver from NC State out of the portal and Kevin Concepcion. And don't sleep on true freshman wideout Jerome Miles. He's a beast. He should get significant playing time. I expect him to be a major contributor during the middle portion of the season for the Aggies once he starts to get settled in and they start going to him a lot more. Your pass rush also is a big question mark. You lose 3 NFL guys, Nick Scorton, Shamar Turner, and Shamar Stewart, but you replace them with a guy in TJ Searcy who should be really productive for you. You also got another pretty solid pass rusher out of the portal, which I'm not going to try to pronounce his name. I don't know how to pronounce that thing. But if you can get really good receiving play this year and your pass rush can be really good as what it was last season and possibly be a little bit better, I definitely can see Texas A&M winning the SEC this year. They got a really talented ball club. They had a really good team last year. They had a lot of carryover from the recruiting classes that Jimbo Fish was bringing in. And their schedule is pretty favorable. Your first 6 games of the season, 5 of those are going to be at home, which includes you having a home game against Florida, which that's going to be a really pivotal matchup for you. Florida could be a team that's vying for a playoff spot like you. And your toughest road games early during the year, you played Notre Dame in South Bend. Then you got to play LSU in Texas on the road at some point during this season. But all 3 of those road games are winnable. You are a better team talent-wise than what Notre Dame is coming into this year. Although their offensive line is a strength, they got question marks at quarterback. You have a more proven quarterback in Marcel Reed. You also got a really stacked defense on the linebacker unit and the secondary front. You should be good in that area. And we know that Notre Dame isn't the best when it comes to throwing the football. LSU, you were able to outcoach Brian Kelly last year. In the second half, Garrett Nussmeier and him just completely imploded in that game. And Texas, that's a rivalry game. Despite Texas being the most talented team entering this season, rivalry games normally tend to be close regardless of the talent level, as long as you have a really good coach, which I believe Mike Elko is. He was winning at Duke. Duke isn't just a school that anybody can jump and win at. So if you can win at Duke, you definitely can win at Texas A&M. And the talent discrepancy between A&M and Texas, it's wide, but it's not this. You feel me? It's not like Vandy compared to Texas. It's kind of like this, because you have recruited very well. I would say that you've recruited somewhat on par with Texas these last couple of years. It's just the player development hasn't really been there and the coaching hasn't been there. But this year, though, with what Texas A&M has and everybody pretty much coming back that was really productive for you offensively last year. If you can figure out receiver, we know Marcel Reed is a baller. We know what Le'Veon Moss does. And behind offensive line that returns everybody, this should be a really good offense and be a lot better than what they were last year. There were times when the offense just got a little bit stuck in the mud. But I'm excited for what A&M could be this year. And I was talking with a buddy of mine before I started recording this. He was saying, like, A&M could be a dark horse team this year. I agree. I don't feel like they're getting talked about enough in terms of teams that can win this conference. Of course, you feel they can make it to the playoffs, but they got an actual shot to win the SEC. They were a game shy of making it to the SEC title game last year. And if they would have beaten Texas, who knows? Maybe they could have beaten Georgia. Georgia, you know, with the quarterback situation, the drops that they had at wide receiver, Texas A&M, you're not always what your record says you are. That's Josh Pate's famous saying. A&M was a lot better than that 8-5 record that they had. It's just things went left near the tail end of the season with the injuries and, you know, the inconsistencies that they had from their offense at times with Marcel Reed being a young quarterback. That's to be expected. But in terms of who's the dark horse team in the SEC this year, I'm going to go with Texas A&M.